And Ross Hodge will be a part of our show. We're now joined by Chip Patterson, CBS Sports. Wrote a massive, really in-depth Final Four preview before the tournament began down in Houston. He joins us now on 365 Sports. Chip, thank you for your time. Did anything of what you saw this past weekend surprise you with the two games?
Yes. I thought that the way that San Diego State had really, like they limited an Alabama team that obviously had a first-team All-American in Brandon Miller, but an Alabama team that had scored a lot of points. They hold them under 65. They hold a Creighton team that, while not necessarily up-tempo, certainly had firepower. They hold them under 60. Like the trend for San Diego State was that, when San Diego State had its very few losses on the season, they happened when, a team was able to push it a little bit, make some shots. And look, FAU is going to always be frustrated with some of the misses in what ended up being a game decided by the smallest of margins. But FAU, for the most part, had one of the best offensive performances against San Diego State that we've seen, not just in the NCAA tournament, but in the Mountain West tournament as well, all of postseason play. So I think that what surprised me the most was that FAU had so much offensive success and also lost.
Chip, so can they defend this Connecticut team which goes 9 deep?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Can they defend this Connecticut team that goes 9 deep?
Not on the inside. They're going to have problems with Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan, and basically it just comes down to whether or not those guys can stay out of foul trouble. That's kind of the way that I see it.
Chip, how do you feel about just the matchup itself? A lot of talk about the blue bloods and the new bloods and the, I guess, no bloods in some ways. But what is your anticipation level for having two programs like FAU and San Diego State versus the norm?
Two thoughts on this. Number one, you just got like one of the bluest blue blood Final Fours of all time only 1 year ago with North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, and Villanova all in the Final Four at the same time. So, this is a little bit of a course correction, a little bit of a snapback the other way. I also think that in the context of just this season, it's reflective of what we saw. I mean, remember that stretch where nobody could hold on to being the number one team in the country, and it was just getting passed around and around and around. And then how many, Saturday nights or Sunday mornings did we look back at everything that had happened in college basketball, and we were like, wow, look at, 7 ranked teams lost to unranked teams, or, the AP would come out and say, this is the most number of ranked teams that have lost in a single day, most number of ranked teams that have lost to unranked teams in a single day. Like, what it told us was the teams that we thought were the very, very best, the number one teams in the country, the margin between that number one team and other teams was small. And that the teams that were in the top 25, the margin between those teams and teams that weren't in the top 25, the margin was small. And so with that as my evidence of what this college basketball season was, now we get to the NCAA tournament, and we've got a 4, a 5, a 5, a 9. We've got a San Diego State first-timer, an FAU first-timer, Miami first-timer. To me, that is an NCAA tournament that is reflective of a regular season where the good teams were not that much far ahead from just the very good teams were not that much far ahead than the good teams. And when that margin is small and it's a single elimination tournament in a 40-minute basketball game where anything can happen, then I think that's why you saw some less than expected results, especially for the top 3 seeds.
Do you think that it's also due to the transfer portal?
Here's what I'll push back on. I think the transfer portal has had a bigger impact, not necessarily in not necessarily across the board in terms of who's been historically good or not historically good, because you got to remember, I also cover college football.
Mm-hmm.
Who cleans up in the transfer portal? Alabama. Who cleans up in the transfer portal? A lot of programs that have got a lot of history. LSU has had a great transfer portal class. But I think that the story for the transfer portal is that if you are a new head coach, you don't have any excuse. Not after what we saw Jerome Tang do at Kansas State, not after what we saw Dennis Gates do at Missouri, not after these coaches in their first or second year when they're able to flip a roster so quickly and achieve instant success. Those are the things that I think are going to create parity. when it comes to the transfer portal. Not necessarily a big picture haves, have-nots within college basketball, but just the idea that, especially in a sport like basketball, that if you can get 3 or 4 guys right when you land, then all of a sudden you could be having some real instant success. And so we don't need to have that long buildup. Like Dan Hurley tonight is the long buildup. You will arrive at UConn, you got a couple years where you don't even make the tournament. Then you get into the tournament, but you have trouble winning a game, advancing in the tournament. Now all of a sudden, he's got this program on the cusp of a 5th national championship. That, to me, doing it over a 5-6 year span, that's more traditional. And, you look at some of this roster, it is Adama Sanogo, a 3-year player. It is Andre Jackson, a 3-year player. Jordan Hawkins, 2-year player. Donovan Clingan as a freshman. But then you go look elsewhere, and that's where you've got the situations like a Kansas State, like a Missouri, where a head coach gets in there, he flips the roster thanks to the transfer portal, and he gets them into the tournament, and in Kansas State's case, gets them all the way to the Elite Eight.
Chip, how do you see this game really shaking out? Do you think that San Diego State can hang for a little while, or is this one that's going to be all she wrote at halftime?
I don't know about at halftime because San Diego State does at least have the ability to be able to control some of that based on what they do on offense. But I just fear that San Diego State's not going to be able to make enough shots. I mean, it was an incredibly encouraging sign to see Matt Bradley have such a big game against FAU. He had been a non-factor in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight, and he has been, for the last 2 seasons, San Diego State's most important offensive player. But here's what I'm remembering from Saturday night. Those Miami guards that are so good at getting downhill, Isaiah Wong, Nigel Pack, even Jordan Miller from the forward position, and they couldn't get anything at the rim. Nothing. That's the impact of Adama Sanogo. That's the impact of Donovan Clingan and what they can do. And I just worry that San Diego State, which is a little bit less skilled at the guard position and a little bit more undersized at the guard position, that when they're trying to get downhill and get to the free throw line, I just don't know if they're going to be able to finish strong because of what UConn has on the inside. So can San Diego State with really, really good defense, remember, they beat Ryan Kalkbrenner. The idea of going up against a really good all Big East 7-footer is not going to scare them. But I do think over the course of 40 minutes, we're going to see this be a little bit of a coronation by the time we get into like the under 4 timeout. I don't know if they'll be clearing the benches, but I am predicting a double-digit UConn win.
Regardless of what happens tonight as far as the outcome, Chip, obviously it's been a banner year for the Aztecs, and they've done a lot of good for their athletics programs, but you're also a big college football guy. I know you've seen the talk about the Pac-12 and, SMU, San Diego State, all of that. How do you feel like the Aztecs fit as far as that potential new future of theirs, and how much do you think this basketball run has helped aid that or should help aid that?
I think the wheels were in motion at the institutional level. And like I do, that, wooing the university presidents is more important than winning public opinion. Mm-hmm. But for public opinion, goodness gracious, I'd announce it tomorrow. I would come out, unless they get totally blasted,
right.
But I would come out and I would say that San Diego State team that just made it to the national championship game and gave UConn all it could handle, we are inviting them to the Pac-12. And this is what we're going to do. San Diego State made it farther than UCLA. San Diego State made it farther than USC. Look at this great addition. That would be the PR side of this. But again, my assumption is that when you already have the institutional wheels in motion, then you're headed at least in that direction. This run, probably just makes it seem a little bit better and a little bit easier to sell to the general college sports public at large. In terms of the addition of San Diego State, you are getting a program that in both men's basketball and football has been the class of the conference at the Mountain West. So if you're going to have to reach down to pull up, so to speak, San Diego State is a great candidate and then an unsurprising one if the Pac-12 is seeking expansion targets.
What do you think happens in that regard? Like with expansion, the media deal, where do you stand on that?
I don't know what the timetable is going to be in terms of media deal, expansion, and how potential expansion has impacted when that deal is going to be, locked in, or whether they're going to, agree to one deal and then reopen it. I think in general that college football playoff expansion has created a bit of a lifeline for, the Pac-12, the ACC, the Big 12. There's a lot of panic about the financial gap between the SEC and the Big 10, but as long as there are 6 automatic bids to the 12-team playoff that are reserved for conference champions, then there is a competitive edge to not necessarily – like, you are giving up a lot at the bank, but you still have a path to be able to make it to the college football playoff. So, where are we headed with all this? What you talked to me in July of 2022, I thought we were headed to a 230. I thought we were headed towards like the doomsday power 2. Everything is exploding, and I think that interestingly enough, college football playoff expansion, something that I fundamentally think we didn't need, might end up being the thing that sort of puts pause on this, barreling towards the future where the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, basically everybody but the SEC and the Big 10 is playing in a different universe.
Yeah, I don't know who it was. It was maybe an AD or somebody that mentioned they just want to have hope that the fact when you start practicing in August that you have a chance to play for the national champion no matter what conference you're in.
Right, and that's, when you've got, like, for example, there are six spots in the 12-team playoff that are reserved for conference champions, which means not just in the Pac-12, not just in the Big 12, but in the American Athletic Conference. You're showing up in fall camp like, all right, there's a path for us. In the Sun Belt, you're saying like, okay, here we go. Even in the Mountain West, like if we pull all this together and if we beat everybody on our schedule, we can show up on Conference Championship Saturday where a win could end up giving us a shot at the national championship. So, yeah, there is like an inclusion aspect of this where some of these leagues, they're going to have an understanding that financially they are at an enormous deficit, but competitively when it comes to competing for the national championship, they still have a way to put it all together. And look, San Diego State operates at a deficit to a lot of major athletic departments. And San Diego State is playing for a national championship on the first Monday night in April. And that's about all you can ask for.
Yep. We've had those presidents, ADs, whoever from those conferences get maybe $4 million, $5 million, $6 or $7 million. And now, no matter which of the Power Five or whatever we want to call them, they would at least get 3-4 times that. And that's got to be a huge thing. Thank you very much, Chip. Great stuff. Great preview from Friday. And also thanks for your time from the tournament itself.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.
Chip Patterson, CBS Sports, on his thoughts about San Diego State and UConn, what he thinks is the difference, and then also even a lot of the discussion about realignment in college football since he covers that very thoroughly for CBS Sports.